Welcome to the deep dive. If you feel like the world of artificial intelligence is moving at light speed and you're constantly trying to catch up, oh, you are definitely not alone.
Not at all. It's truly the definition of a pervasive disruptive technology.
It's not just that AI is improving incrementally. It feels like it's fundamentally reshaping the bedrock systems of our civilization. Things like healthcare, our infrastructure, climate response.
And it's doing it with this, just dizzying velocity. We've moved well past the theoretical stage where we talked about if AI would change things.
Right.
We are now looking at specific, measurable, really impactful shifts happening right now as we speak across some of the most critical sectors globally. The question isn't about potential anymore. It's about current reality.
And that is exactly why we dove so deeply into the most recent intelligence gathered from the field, really trying to synthesize what's happened specifically here in early 2026. Our mission today is to provide you, the insightful learner, with a crucial shortcut. We're going to thoroughly unpack what the latest developments mean across three critical areas.
The triple helix.
Exactly, the triple helix of AI progress. These are three interlocking areas of just immense impact. Its transformative role in personalized patient care,
Which is huge.
its applications in combating global environmental challenges, and, of course, the urgent ethical debates that are forcing us to establish some kind of guardrails around this rapid deployment.
Exactly. And we aren't just summarizing headlines you might have already skimmed. Our goal here is to connect the innovation to so what?
The so what, yes.
The broader implications for society and for how you think about policy and technology. Understanding these specific areas, health, planet, and ethics, provides the core vocabulary and the context needed to intelligently navigate what's coming.
To distinguish the real breakthroughs from, just the hype. Okay, let's unpack this and dive right into section one. This is, I think, the most immediately tangible and personal area of impact. The diagnostic revolution AI in personalized healthcare.
This is where you can really see the sheer processing power being brought to bear on human problems.
When we read the sources on AI in a medical setting, the picture that's painted is not one of a replacement for doctors or nurses,
No, not at all.
but rather an unparalleled digital assistant. And this isn't just about, faster document retrieval. It's about a radical enhancement of a physician's cognitive capability.
That is the essential concept to grasp. I mean, we have to appreciate the sheer volume of information a medical professional has to manage today. It's a logistical and intellectual impossibility for one human being.
Just impossible.
Think about it. A constant stream of new research, thousands of new papers published every year, a massive, ever-growing backlog of patient records, often stored in these disparate, incompatible formats.
And then you layer on top of that the exponentially increasing complexity of genetic and biological data.
The cognitive load is absolutely crushing.
And this is where the unique selling proposition of AI, its sheer speed and volume handling, becomes the defining factor. The sources state specifically that AI can analyze these vast, complex data sets. We're talking everything from thousands of medical journals to comprehensive patient records, genetic data, and critically unstructured data like radiology images or clinical notes
And it can
in mere seconds. So how does that instant analysis fundamentally change the physician's role? I mean, beyond just making things a little bit faster.
Well, that speed, measured in seconds instead of what used to take weeks, that is the paradigm shift.
Okay.
In the traditional system, when faced with a complex or a rare presentation, a doctor might spend days, maybe even weeks, coordinating manual literature reviews, searching through similar historical cases, or just waiting for an expert consultation.
So all of that time is spent just gathering the data.
Exactly. That time is currently spent on data gathering and synthesis tasks that don't really require human judgment, but they do require immense human time.
So the AI is essentially performing the exhaustive research, the literature review, and all the cross-referencing simultaneously.
Precisely. We are seeing these large language models, LLMs, that are specifically trained on medical text. Then they're coupled with advanced convolutional neural networks, CNNs, that are handling the image recognition.
So that would be for like scanning a mammogram or a pathology slide.
Exactly. These systems are ingesting both the structured data, lab values, vital signs, and the unstructured data, like the text of a doctor's handwritten notes or the visual information in a scan.
And by synthesizing all that instantly, What's the output?
The physician is immediately presented with highly distilled, synthesized insights.
So it means the doctor isn't spending 80% of their time just searching and reading and cross-referencing.
That's it.
They're presented with an instant differential diagnosis, and it even comes with supporting evidence derived from millions of similar cases from all over the world.
Exactly. The human doctor moves immediately from that low-value data gathering to high-value, complex decision-making, patient interaction, and, ethical evaluation.
So the AI manages the volume, the cross-referencing, the speed.
And it frees the human expert to apply their irreplaceable judgment, nuance, contextual understanding, and empathy to the actual patient relationship.
So it elevates the role of the doctor.
It does. It outsources the most tedious and cognitively demanding parts of pure information processing. That's why it's called an assistant. It's augmenting the professional. It's not replacing them.
And this shift in workload, it leads directly to the next key advancement. Predicting diagnoses with what the sources kept calling unprecedented accuracy. This goes beyond just being fast. It's a measurable leap in precision, all thanks to these machine learning algorithms analyzing that complex medical data.
Well, the jump in accuracy comes from a type of pattern recognition that is simply not feasible for a human. It's just beyond our scale.
What do you mean by that?
Well, consider a rare cancer. A world-class oncologist might have seen, dozens, maybe a couple hundred cases in their entire career, but a machine learning model is trained on global data sets of millions of cases.
And not just the successful diagnoses, I assume.
Right. It includes the near misses, the long-term follow-ups. They can spot correlations that are too subtle, too complex, or, too temporally distant for a human to ever notice.
Okay, so what are the specific mechanisms driving this precision leap? How does it actually work?
There are really two main drivers. First is just the scale of the analysis. AI can identify these subtle precursor signals, what we call biomarker signatures, in routine lab work or imaging, sometimes years before a condition becomes clinically apparent.
Years?
Years. And second is the handling of unstructured data. For instance, in radiology, specialized CNNs are now demonstrating higher accuracy than human specialists in detecting early-stage lung nodules on CT scans.
Oh.
Or they're identifying subtle changes in retinal scans that can predict the onset of diabetes or cardiovascular disease long before the patient ever presents with symptoms.
That capability seeing things years in advance, that's revolutionary. But let's focus on the contribution of genetic data analysis specifically. How does analyzing a person's individual genetic makeup contribute to this huge leap in precision, especially in the diagnostic phase?
Well, analyzing genetic data moves diagnosis beyond simply observing symptoms, which are often the late-stage manifestation of a problem.
Right, you're looking at the sword code.
You're looking at the underlying instruction manual. So when an AI correlates a patient's specific genetic markers with known disease pathways and outcomes across a massive data set, it allows for incredibly sophisticated modeling.
Which means it can predict not just the likelihood of developing something,
but also the specific trajectory of that disease if it does manifest. And this level of insight allows clinicians to move from a reactive treatment model to a highly proactive, preventative one. You can intervene earlier and with much greater targeting.
That is just incredibly powerful. And what's so vital for you to grasp here is that this isn't just lab talk or some future academic potential. The sources really emphasize that these technologies are not just theoretical.
No, they are already being implemented and integrated into hospital systems worldwide. This grounds the conversation firmly in current reality.
We're talking about deployed technology.
Absolutely. Hospitals are integrating AI tools for triaging emergency room scans, for prioritizing pathological slide analysis, for flagging high-risk patients in primary care. They're doing it because these tools demonstrate a direct, quantifiable return on investment.
Better outcomes, more efficient use of resources.
More efficient resource allocation and better patient outcomes, exactly. If an AI can reliably assist in processing a complex diagnostic workflow that used to require multiple specialists and took 3 hours, and now it completes it in 3 minutes.
The result is immediately more efficient, more effective, and more accessible care for everyone.
That is the new standard that is being established right now.
So it means that the next time you interact with a major medical system, the diagnostic backbone is likely already powered in some way by AI. It's no longer a future concept, it's infrastructure.
And this foundational speed and accuracy in diagnosis, it unlocks the next critical step, The realization of personalized medicine. We are finally moving past the generalized population-level approach to treatment.
Right. For decades, medicine has been about broad categories, a standard drug for a standard condition. But AI unlocks this customization layer. The mechanism is fascinating. AI analyzes that extensive individual patient data, especially the genetic makeup, along with environmental and lifestyle data points.
It's so important. If you look at the historical approach to pharmacology, particularly for chronic disease, a huge percentage of treatment has been based on generalized clinical trials.
Right. Finding what works for the average patient.
Exactly. And those trials establish safety and efficacy for the average patient. But because every human metabolizes drugs differently, that average response often leads to wasted time, severe side effects, or just ineffective treatment for patients who fall outside the norm.
It's the very definition of a trial and error approach.
Huh.
But with AI processing individual genetic data at scale, that traditional process is completely inverted.
Mm-hmm.
The outcome is the ability to tailor treatments specifically to each person's unique molecular profile, which the Sources Project will significantly improve outcomes and reduce those adverse side effects.
Exactly. This is where something called pharmacogenomics or PGX becomes actionable at scale. AI models analyze the massive data output from next-generation sequencing of a patient's DNA.
And what are they looking for?
They look specifically at enzyme function, particularly the cytochrome P450 family, which dictates how fast or slow a patient will metabolize certain drugs, be they anticoagulants, chemotherapy agents, or even antidepressants.
So instead of a doctor prescribing a starting dose of an antidepressant and then waiting 4 to 6 weeks to see if it works.
AI can predict, based on your genes, that you are a fast metabolizer and would need a higher dose right away. Or, conversely, you might be a slow metabolizer who requires a fraction of the standard dose to avoid toxicity.
That's the perfect illustration.
A tailored treatment might involve adjusting the dosage of a standard medication. Or, in oncology, it often means selecting a highly specialized therapeutic drug or immunotherapy that is effective only for a precise, rare mutation present in their tumor DNA.
And without AI, spotting that one mutation would be impossible.
It would be like finding a needle in a haystack, often missed entirely because of the complexity.
But doesn't using genetic data at this scale introduce new systemic risks?
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about access, equity, data ownership.
Right.
How do the sources address the fact that this highly personalized, probably expensive care could widen the gap between those who can afford it and those who can't?
That is a critical friction point, and it's discussed at length in the analysis. While the technological promise is immense, the challenge of equitable access is very real. Personalized medicine relies on extensive, high-quality genetic data. If the initial data sets used to train the AI are overwhelmingly drawn from privileged populations, and historically, that has absolutely been the case.
Then the algorithms might not work as well for other groups?
Exactly. The resulting algorithms may be less accurate or even irrelevant for underrepresented groups. The sources emphasize that policy must mandate data diversity and transparency in training sets to ensure that these massive medical benefits don't just exacerbate existing health disparities.
And then there's the cost of the treatment itself.
Of course. Targeted therapies are often premium priced. So AI might identify the perfect drug for you, but if insurance or financial means prohibit access to it, the benefit is nullified.
So for you, the learner, the key takeaway here is this monumental shift. We're moving from generalized drug prescriptions, that old trial and error approach, to genetically targeted interventions, where AI provides the precise metabolic map.
Right.
But we have to couple that technical advancement with a rigorous commitment to equity in data and access to make sure this revolution actually benefits everyone.
It connects the dots between the immense complexity of the human genome and the precise action of a drug, and it can potentially eliminate all that guesswork. It ensures the treatment path has the highest statistical probability of success for you specifically.
And the next challenge is making sure that probability is actionable for everyone globally.
That's it. It seems the analytical power of AI has finally made the promise of personalized medicine a reality, even while it's raising these very complex socioeconomic questions.
Okay, now we're going to pivot completely. We're going from the micro, the individual human body, to the macro, the global planetary system.
It's a huge shift in scale.
We've seen AI save hours in the hospital and tailor individual treatments. How does that same massive data power translate to, well, saving the planet?
This is where AI really takes on a role as the global optimizer. Its primary value here is its ability to handle massive, dynamic, real-time sensory data across these sprawling, interconnected systems.
Like what?
Weather, energy grids, supply chains, agricultural processes. Unlike medical data, which, while complex, is ultimately rooted in the human body, climate data is constantly changing. It makes optimization a monumental, continuous task.
And the source material highlights that AI is stepping up to address these environmental challenges by focusing squarely on optimization. It's hitting the industrial challenge right where it hurts.
Yeah.
Waste and inefficiency.
And industries, especially large-scale manufacturing, logistics, data centers,
Hmm.
they are massive energy sponges. And critically, they're often running on legacy systems that were not built with energy efficiency as the primary driver. Their operational complexity, coordinating machinery, cooling, supply chain timing, it makes traditional static efficiency assessments slow, costly, and often incomplete.
So small inefficiencies, when you multiply them across a global fleet of factories or shipping operations, they add up.
They aggregate into a colossal carbon footprint.
And the mechanism of reduction here is crucial.
Yeah.
AI is used to optimize energy consumption in those large-scale industries. The direct, measurable result they're tracking, directly reducing the carbon footprint of these major sectors.
And that reduction is measurable and often surprisingly high. Take, for example, the operation of a massive cloud data center. Cooling these facilities requires immense power.
A huge amount.
AI systems are now deployed to constantly monitor thousands of variables: external air temperature, internal server load, humidity, fan speed, power draw, across thousands of individual servers. And they use predictive modeling to anticipate cooling needs minute by minute, rather than just relying on a simple thermostat.
So we're talking about eliminating reactionary power use. Instead of waiting for a rack of servers to get too hot and then blasting the AC.
The AI anticipates the heat increase based on predicted user demand and subtly ramps up cooling only as needed.
And the savings must be significant.
Significant. We're talking double-digit percentage savings in cooling costs alone. In manufacturing, AI looks at things like optimal startup and shutdown sequencing for industrial machinery, optimizing furnace temperatures in steel production, or minimizing chemical reaction times.
So it's the specific process where AI systems analyze these vast amounts of industrial data that was probably siloed before, to pinpoint hidden inefficiencies and suggest more sustainable, real-time practices.
Exactly. And this also applies heavily to the energy grid itself, which is under massive stress as we transition to renewables.
Absolutely. The smart grid is a foundational AI application.
It has to be. Solar and wind power are intermittent. The sun sets, the wind dies down. AI is essential for managing this volatility. It uses predictive modeling, combining weather forecasts with consumer demand forecasts, to decide instantly whether to draw power from a wind farm in Texas, release stored energy from a battery bank in California, or engage a peaker plant in New York.
That's that demand-side management we hear about.
That's it. It ensures grid stability while prioritizing the use of renewable energy, which reduces our reliance on those fossil fuel backups.
So the collective impact of hundreds of large industries making these small AI-driven gains in efficiency and the grid becoming smarter,
Yeah.
that translates into substantial reductions in global emissions.
Gigaton scale reductions. This optimization angle is one of the most powerful contributions AI is making to the climate fight today.
And beyond optimization, we have to consider the extraordinary predictive power that AI brings to climate change.
Particularly concerning extreme weather and natural disasters. Climate patterns are notoriously difficult to model accurately because of the nonlinear, chaotic nature of atmospheric physics.
And they're becoming more volatile and more frequent.
They are. This is where we see the use of AI-driven models providing these valuable insights into climate patterns.
And what's the specific application that's most critical right now in terms of immediate impact?
It's helping scientists predict extreme weather events with greater accuracy and extended lead times. Traditional models, known as numerical weather prediction or NWP, they rely on complex physics equations and massive computational power.
Right.
AI deep learning models, particularly those leveraging specialized transformer architectures, they don't replace NWP, but they augment and accelerate them. They can ingest real-time satellite data, atmospheric readings, ocean temperature shifts, historical storm tracks, and integrate this complex data far faster than traditional methods.
I see. So instead of purely relying on physics simulations that take hours to compute, AI can rapidly identify patterns in the data that correlate with the development of, say, an atmospheric river or a rapidly intensifying hurricane.
Exactly. They act as rapid pattern recognition engines for these complex climate phenomena. Specific applications include real-time wildfire prediction, where AI combines high-resolution satellite imagery, ground moisture readings, wind forecasts,
To identify ignition risk zones hours or even days ahead of time.
allowing for proactive, targeted resource deployment. Similarly, in tracking rapidly intensifying cyclones, AI can often predict the necessary resources, saving lives and, well, resources.
The practical impact of better prediction is immediate, and it's life-saving. I mean, if you can predict a major flood or a hurricane with greater accuracy and a longer lead time, the preparation can be exponentially more effective.
Absolutely. We are talking about effective preparation and proactive mitigation. This predictive power is crucial for preparing and mitigating the impacts of these disasters.
And it translates directly to potentially saving lives and resources.
It really does. For example, a water management authority with 72 hours warning of a major rainfall event instead of just 24 can successfully adjust reservoir levels, pre-position sandbags, and issue effective evacuation orders. That capability saves billions, but most importantly, it saves human lives.
It's the difference between reactive crisis management and proactive risk management.
That's it, exactly.
However, we do need to inject that critical nuance here, which the sources wisely emphasize. While AI is a powerful tool, it is not a silver bullet for climate change. Why is it so important to really make that distinction?
Because there's a danger in what's called technological determinism, this belief that technology alone will solve systemic human problems. The underlying cause of climate change is systemic human behavior, policy decisions, and market externalities. AI can optimize energy grids and predict storms, but it can't force global regulatory change. It can't eliminate the global reliance on fossil fuels that our policies currently permit.
And there's also the paradox of AI itself, right? The energy cost of training these models.
A huge paradox. The training of these massive, complex models that we need for highly accurate climate and genetic analysis is incredibly energy intensive. It requires vast data centers running on high-powered GPUs.
So AI designed to fight climate change has its own significant carbon cost that needs to be factored into the equation. It's a crucial trade-off.
It is. The industry is working hard on making AI training more efficient, but that tension exists. And if we treat AI as a complete solution, the silver bullet, we risk reducing the urgency of human policy action, which is ultimately the only thing that can address the root cause.
So AI is an extraordinary instrument for adaptation and efficiency within our existing constraints.
But it requires political will and policy shifts to truly solve the problem at its core.
Understood.
Yeah.
A powerful, resource-intensive tool, but one that operates within a political and systemic framework that still requires human leadership and legislative action. Okay, so we've covered the phenomenal upside. Saving lives through personalized medicine, optimizing the planet's systems against environmental disaster. Now we have to address the essential friction points.
The counterbalance.
Section 3 brings us to the critical crossroads. The necessary ethical considerations and the urgent need for robust guardrails.
This is the necessary counterbalance to all that rapid innovation. The faster these systems are deployed, making life and death decisions in healthcare or billion-dollar decisions in industry, the more pressing the ethical and societal risks become. The ethical framework has to evolve just as quickly as the technology.
And the sources outline this triad of major ethical challenges that are becoming more pressing than ever: privacy, bias, and accountability.
And these are not just, theoretical anxieties. They are the immediate operational risks of deploying AI at this scale.
Let's start with privacy.
Well, think back to the data we just discussed in Section 1. Highly personalized genetic information, extensive medical records, proprietary industrial performance data. The sheer volume and, more importantly, the extreme sensitivity of the data being ingested by these systems makes privacy concerns paramount.
An anonymized record isn't always truly anonymous.
No. Once it's cross-referenced with enough other data points, it can often be de-anonymized. And if that data is breached or misused for targeted discrimination, or it falls into the wrong hands, the potential for individual and systemic harm is just catastrophic.
And then there's accountability, which seems to be the greatest regulatory sticking point.
It really is.
If an AI system, for example, misses an early-stage cancer diagnosis because of a flaw in its training data, or if an optimized industrial process causes an environmental event, who is ultimately held responsible?
Is it the hospital, the software vendor, the data scientist who built the model, or is it the human operator who just blindly trusted the output?
That ambiguity regarding legal liability and ethical responsibility is completely unsustainable, especially in these high-stakes areas.
It is. And that's why there has been this recent development of growing calls for stricter, more enforceable regulations and robust ethical frameworks all over the world. Regulators are being pushed to move beyond these voluntary guidelines and establish legally binding standards.
So this isn't just about good faith development anymore.
No, it's about legislative action to create these necessary safety nets before the pace of deployment completely outpaces public trust and our regulatory capability. We're seeing proposals that mandate third-party audits and require human sign-off on critical automated decisions.
And the sources suggest regulators are focusing heavily on areas where an algorithmic error translates directly to physical or economic harm.
Absolutely. The regulatory focus is shifting toward requiring what are called algorithmic impact assessments before deployment. This forces developers to proactively identify and mitigate risks related to privacy breaches and systemic biases before the system ever goes live.
To ensure the technology serves the public interest, not just corporate efficiency.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about one of the most insidious problems identified in the source material: algorithmic bias. Unchecked, it actively perpetuates and amplifies existing societal inequalities.
And this is particularly frightening given the high-stakes applications we just discussed.
The root problem is straightforward, but it sounds difficult to solve.
It is. The problem is that AI learns from the data it is fed. If that dataset reflects historical human biases, the resulting analysis will inherit and then operationalize those biases at scale.
And it often makes them invisible because the system presents the output as, objective fact.
Precisely.
Can you give us a concrete example of how this plays out in a high-stakes setting like the medical context we established earlier?
Yeah. Sure. Consider medical devices and screening tools. Historically, research and development focused on populations of European descent. This has led to known disparities. For example, some pulse oximeters, the devices that measure blood oxygen, have been shown to systematically misread oxygen levels in patients with darker skin tones.
Okay.
Now, if an AI is trained on data where this systemic undermeasurement is present, the AI will learn that a lower reading for that demographic is acceptable.
And subsequently, the algorithm might systematically delay or deny critical interventions for those underrepresented populations because it doesn't recognize a true emergency.
That is the precise danger. If the input reflects existing societal biases, the output decisions will inevitably be skewed, and you create a technological barrier to equitable care.
Which is why the solution highlighted in the source material is so critical. The urgent need for diverse, meticulously curated datasets and inclusive AI training programs.
It requires deliberate, conscious intervention by developers. It won't happen by accident.
So, the intellectual implication for the learner here is understanding why dataset diversity is the core mechanism for debiasing. What technical steps are developers taking beyond just collecting more demographic data?
Well, it goes deeper than just collection. Developers are using advanced techniques like synthetic data generation to create representative data where real-world data is lacking or skewed.
So they're creating data to fill the gaps.
They are, and they're also utilizing what are called fairness metrics. These are statistical tools that specifically test the AI model to ensure that outcomes are fair across different demographic subgroups, rather than just ensuring overall accuracy for the whole population.
And it matters who is building these systems.
Of course. The people developing and training the AI must be diverse themselves to identify and mitigate these cultural or historical blind spots before the system goes live. It's about auditing for equity throughout the entire development lifecycle, not just fixing a bug later on.
So it's about designing fairness into the foundational architecture of the technology, realizing that bias is not just a technical failure, but a reflection of systemic human failures encoded into data.
Exactly. And that leads to the final major ethical pillar, which is transparency and the resulting auditability.
The black box problem.
The black box problem. As decisions become automated and algorithms get increasingly complex, the user demand is growing exponentially for more clarity on how AI systems arrive at their decisions. People will not accept a black box determining their future.
And this demand is particularly acute in what the sources call critical areas like finance and law enforcement. Why do those sectors specifically face the most intense scrutiny about explainability?
Because the decisions made there have immediate, massive consequences for people's fundamental rights, their economic stability, and their freedom. If an AI decides you are a high credit risk, resulting in the denial of a mortgage,
Or if predictive policing algorithm flags a neighborhood for increased surveillance.
the individual needs to know the why. They need to understand the data points that were weighted, the factors that were prioritized, and the rationale used to classify them. Without that transparency, without a human-readable explanation, there is no genuine recourse. Due process is undermined, and public trust in the institution evaporates.
Which directly links to the concept of explainable AI, or XAI, which we see mentioned throughout the sources as the regulatory goal.
Exactly. XAI is not about revealing proprietary source code. It's about providing a clear, concise, human-readable rationale for the automated decision. Companies and governments are being urged, and in some jurisdictions now mandated, to adopt more transparent practices.
And this involves developing tools that explain, for instance, which 5 features like zip code, past payment history, current debt load were most influential in a credit score denial.
Right. And what does XAI look like in practice for these really complex models? I mean, if the algorithm is a vast neural network, how can we truly look inside that black box?
It requires trade-offs. We use techniques like Lime local interpretable model agnostic explanations and SAP values. These tools don't explain the entire billion-parameter model at once.
That would be impossible.
Impossible. Instead, they explain why a specific individual decision was made. So for the specific case of a denied loan, the XAI system will generate a report showing the weight and influence of the input data relative to that one outcome.
And that allows a human review board or a regulatory body to challenge or justify the automated decision.
So the ultimate goal of transparency is ensuring that AI decisions can be audited, understood, and challenged by humans. That auditability is the necessary check and balance.
It is. If a system's decisions can be tracked, reviewed, and justified to an oversight committee, then the AI remains a powerful, accountable tool.
And that's the final synthesis point, really. These ethical considerations are not secondary. They are crucial prerequisites.
They are. They ensure that AI, as a technology, ultimately serves humanity's best interests. Without installing rigorous guardrails, now focusing on privacy, mitigating bias through diverse data, and enforcing transparency, we risk deploying systems that reflect and amplify the worst of our societal shortcomings, regardless of the technological benefits. The ethics must govern the innovation.
It is the ultimate tension. The accelerating exponential speed of innovation versus the necessarily deliberative, careful pace of governance and ethical scrutiny. So let's quickly recap the incredible landscape we've charted today. We undertook a deep dive to give you a comprehensive, in-depth snapshot of AI's most impactful recent shifts in early 2026.
Our first major takeaway was that personalized accuracy in health. AI is now functioning as an unparalleled digital assistant, analyzing complex data, especially high-volume genetic and imaging data, in just seconds.
And that speed allows for genetically tailored treatments and an unprecedented diagnostic velocity. It's proving that efficient, effective, personalized care is becoming today's standard, not tomorrow's dream.
Second, we saw the efficiency gains against climate change. AI serves as the global optimizer, analyzing vast data streams to pinpoint industrial energy inefficiencies in real time and offering that crucial predictive power to mitigate the impact of volatile weather events.
But we noted that while it is an incredibly powerful instrument for adaptation, it has to be supported by human policy action to address the systemic causes of climate change, especially given that AI paradox of high training energy costs.
And finally, that unavoidable pivot toward ethical governance and transparency. As AI integration increases into these high-stakes environments, the triad of concerns, privacy, bias, and accountability demands immediate regulatory action.
Requiring diverse data sets and mandatory auditability through these explainable AI systems. But here's where it gets really interesting, building directly on that final point of auditability. We've established that the goal is human understanding and control. But consider the scale. If these systems are processing thousands of patient records or billions of atmospheric data points in seconds, using a weighted logic that is constantly adapting, learning, and finding non-obvious correlations.
This raises the single most important question for you, the learner, to continue mulling over. Can human auditing ever truly keep pace with exponential AI complexity? How do we ensure genuine human understanding and maintain control? Not just transparency about the data inputs, but genuine intuitive insight into the dynamic process of decision-making, when the AI's analytical speed and complexity surpass our own cognitive limits by orders of magnitude.
That's the core of it.
If the AI is technically correct, but its reasoning is impenetrable to the human mind, what does that do to our foundational concepts of legal accountability and trust?
An incredibly powerful thought to leave you with, defining the boundary between technological acceleration and human governability. That tension between speed and ethical control will absolutely define the next decade of regulation and innovation.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the triple helix of AI progress.
Stay curious, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.